Luke 24. That very day, two of them were going to a village named Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. And they were talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing together, Jesus himself drew near and went with them, but their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, "What is this conversation that you're holding with each other as you walk?" And they stood still, looking sad. Then one of them, named Cleopas, answered him, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened in these days?" And he said to them, "What things?" And he said to him, "Concerning Jesus of Nazareth, a man who was a prophet, mighty in word and deed before God and all the people, and how our chief priests and rulers delivered him up to be condemned to death and crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one to redeem Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now the third day since all these things happened. Moreover, some women from our company amazed us. They were at the tomb early in the morning, and when they did not find his body, they came back saying they'd even seen visions of angels who said that he was alive. Some of those who were with us went to the tomb and found it as the women had said, but him they did not see." And he said to them, "O foolish ones, slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Was it not necessary that the Christ should suffer these things and enter into his glory?" And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he interpreted to them all of the scriptures concerning the things concerning himself. So they drew near to the village to which they were going. He acted as if they were going farther, but they urged him strongly, saying, "Stay with us, for it is toward evening, and the day is far spent." So we went in to stay with them. When he was at table with them, he took the bread and blessed it and broke it and gave it to them. And their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. And he vanished from their sight. They said to each other, "Did not our hearts burn within us when he talked to us on the road, while he opened the scriptures to us?" And they rose that same hour and returned to Jerusalem. And they found the 11 and those who were with him gathered together, saying, "The Lord has risen indeed and has appeared to Simon." Then they told what had happened on the road, and how he was known to them in the breaking of the bread. These two guys, Cleopas and whoever else that is, fascinating and eminently human. Think of what they'd been through in the course of the last week. On top of the world by Palm Sunday, and now by Easter night, a week later, they just don't know what to think. So they do what people normally do when they don't know what to think. They just run away. "I'm going home. Forget it. I'm out." So they go. And of course, they're talking because there's nothing along the road to do. There's no earbuds or podcasts to listen to. And if you don't have anything to talk about, the only voices you hear are the voices in your head, and they often scare you. So they're talking about this back and forth, and Jesus walks up. We're told that they're kept from recognizing him, but we don't know what that means, other than, would you expect Jesus to show up? You saw him die. He was probably, of all the universe of people who could have walked along with him, he was probably the last one there. And we have then they have when they have this little exchange with him, "What are you talking about? About Jesus of Nazareth? Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem?" Here's something that we often do. I wonder, especially for us, those of us who've worked in the church, or those of us whose a large portion of our social circles have at least a modicum of connection to the church. How hard would it be for us to run across somebody that you can think of who has zero connection to the church? Zero. And some of this is our own creation. Saw a meme last week of, I wish I would have saved it, but it was one of those 4-generation pictures. Grandpa, dad, son, grandson. And each one of them were captioned. Grandpa, church is essential. Dad, church is beneficial. Son, church is optional. Grandson, who is Jesus? And we've lost ground there. And when we make assumptions that that everybody around us at least has some kind of modicum of connection to Jesus, not only are we missing out on mission opportunities, in many ways we're denying the gospel. We can no longer make that assumption, even in places where we're working. We can't make that assumption that that people are going to have some connection to Jesus. So then what we see in this process is what Jesus does. He takes them back. He takes them back to the scriptures, and he draws the connections. And remember, when in the Gospels, when you hear the word scriptures, we're talking about the Old Testament. We're talking about the Pentateuch. We're talking about the prophets and he connects all of the dots as they're walking along. He connects all the dots between Moses and the prophets and Jesus, saying, "Dude, this is the way it is. He is this guy," and it's fascinating so that they get there and they don't. When he takes them to task, he calls them fools. And remember what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount about calling a guy a fool. That's akin to condemning him, okay? That if you call a guy a fool, you'll be liable to the hell of fire, is what he says. But he calls them fools. Why? Because they deny the clear word of God. And yet the response of these two are really fascinating. They don't get mad. They don't pose. They don't get offended. They listen. And they're so moved by that conversation that they invite him to stay. And he breaks the bread. And it's in the breaking of the bread. Now, this is not a direct allusion. This is not a one-to-one correlation with the Lord's Supper. But you have to be blind, deaf, and dumb not to realize that there's at least an allusion to it. Jesus doing Jesus things. Giving thanks. Breaking bread. That's where I recognize this guy. That's where I recognize this guy. And then look how it changes them. They run back. They're no longer worried. They're no longer worried about the night. They're not worried about their own safety. They're not worried about the Romans. They're not worried about the religious leaders. They just run back because they have to tell everybody, we've seen this guy. And that's what happens to us the more times we spend with Jesus, in his word and at his table. It's the word that causes the heart to burn within us. It's the table that quenches that burning, quench in the best possible sense. The one where he meets us with that which flows from his pierced side, water and blood. He gives, and there we have forgiveness. There we have life. There we have salvation. That's the great joy of what we see. And we have to do this weekly. Church cannot be optional. Necessary is about a bare minimum. And necessary is a law word. It's necessary because, well, I know it's necessary because I forget. Even those of us who are ordained, we often forget. It's my job to go into the pulpit. It's my job to go to a meeting. It's my job to sit with a family who's, but it's when the word moves us to essential, as if it's a way of life, as if it's the source of life. That's what God is moving us to by Christ's presence in his word and at his table. And that's one of the reasons why, in the coming, when we start making the rounds again, starting at the pastor's conference in May, and as I start going back to Winkles in the fall and things like that, where we are going to have to start having, we need to get people more connected to Jesus. The emphasis on into the Word and at the table. More people in Bible study, more opportunities to be at the table. And we can come up with all kinds of BS reasons why we don't. But if we are in that necessary or optional phase, we are failing, and God's calling us back to where we need to be. but he does it lovingly. Again, he doesn't. What he calls us back to is not judgment, but forgiveness.